Chapter 26. The Terrifying Wilde. Wilde, what happened just now? Why did your power suddenly explode by so much? As soon as they got home, Long Chen immediately asked Wilde about what had happened. At that time, Wilde had even given Long Chen an intimidating feeling. I don't know. When I saw that person was about to hit you, my head buzzed, and my whole body became hot. It was like some inexhaustible energy was coming out of my body, described Wilde unsurely. Long Chen put his hand on Wilde's shoulder and used his exceptional spiritual strength to probe his body. But when it entered into his body, he found a completely shocking situation. Wilde's body was different from every other person. Most people had many winding meridians in their body, but Wilde only had 4 meridians. Those 4 meridians went from his dantian to his 4 limbs. This was the first time Long Chen had ever encountered such a thing. Furthermore, the most surprising thing wasn't these strange meridians, but his physical body. A large majority of his cells had become closed off, appearing as if they were dead. But it wasn't a true death. Long Chen could sense that once a heat passed over them, these cells that were in suspended animation would immediately swallow any cells that passed by them before returning into their state of fake death. Wilde truly was a strange being. Long Chen remained puzzled after considering hundreds of possibilities before he finally came to a certain theory. Wilde, have you ever truly been full before? Asked Long Chen. I eat till I'm very full here, said Wilde. Tell me the truth. Well, just being half full is already enough for me. Wilde didn't dare hide the truth. Wilde, remember, I'm your brother Long. You can't tell me any more lies in the future, otherwise I'll get mad. Long Chen admonished seriously. Brother Long, I know. Seeing his severe expression, Wilde nervously agreed. Let me ask, what do you need to eat to feel more powerful? Meat. What kind of meat? Any meat. But beef is the best. I've eaten a bit of it. Long Chen nodded. Wilde's special constitution had 99% of his cells in a suspended animation state. That was because there wasn't enough energy to provide for them. To protect themselves, they had to enter such a state. Even with his pill sovereign memories, Long Chen had never seen such a strange body. Despite already having such a powerful body, only less than 1% of his cells were working. If all of his cells were activated, then just how terrifying would that be? Just thinking about that unnerved Long Chen. But Wilde was his own person, and the stronger he was, the better. How much can you eat in one go? 5 kilograms. Wilde hesitated, and he raised one finger. The truth. A whole cow. The truth! I can eat 5 cows. Tell me the truth! Long Chen's voice was now a shout. I don't know. But if I think I had 10 cows, that would be enough. Wilde had a somewhat bitter expression. He had never gotten to eat that much, so he himself didn't know how much he could eat. Long Chen shook his head, dumbfounded. Okay. Tomorrow I'll go and buy a whole pasture for you. You can eat as much as you want. The next day, Long Chen told Bauer to find a pasture on the outskirts. The pasture wasn't very large, but there were over 1,000 cows on it. Long Chen let Wilde go over, and the result was that the next day, everyone else working on the pasture ran away. They later came to Bauer to report that Wilde was a savage. He would grab a cow and punch it to death, ripping off one of its legs and just start eating it while it was still dripping with blood. All of them were trembling at the memory of it, afraid that Wilde might become interested in them and eat them. Long Chen had no other choice but to hire a dozen chefs that would regularly go over to cook for Wilde. Only then did Wilde get to eat cooked food. But what shocked Long Chen was that Wilde could only eat 10 cows on the first day. With each passing day, his appetite grew ferociously. Since each cow was only only 2 or 3 gold coins, Long Chen wasn't worried about being eaten into poverty. In fact, he delighted in what was happening. The fact that Wilde's appetite was growing was a sign that his cells had started to gradually awaken. Once all his cells had awoken, Wilde would be completely transformed. After resolving Wilde's affairs, Long Chen entered his own seclusion. That battle with the scarred man had given him an extremely great sense of crisis. His feeling from that day was that the scarred man had still been holding back. Although he was not a threat for the moment, Long Chen still felt that this matter would not be resolved so simply. After merging with the pill god's soul, his ability to sense danger had become increasingly great. Last time, his opponent hadn't been properly prepared. Once his opponent was prepared, Long Chen might really be doomed to die. But he still didn't regret it. Even if he was given another chance, he still would have had to handle things the same way. Otherwise, that lash that Wilde received would stay forever in his heart. That heart could not be allowed to have imperfections, or it would eventually become a heart devil. Long Chen entered his seclusion with a great determination this time, and he began to wildly absorb the Feng Fu pills. 7 days later, the Feng Fu star at the bottom of his foot finally emitted an exploding sound. The Feng Fu star had greatly changed under Long Chen's absorption of endless medicinal energy. The smooth outer shell was shed, and what shocked Long Chen was that the inside appeared to be a star. But this star was somewhat indistinct. It was filled with the rhythm of life, though, a shocking state. That was the first star of the NineStarHegemonBodyArt, the Feng Fu star. The current Long Chen was no longer able to sense just what level of power he was at, and he was filled with shock. Boom! The Feng Fu star was shedding its outer layer, suddenly shook, and a terrifying energy even caused the room to shudder. Crap, what a huge movement. Despite being worried, it was too late for Long Chen to do anything. The entire room blew apart like paper. At the same time, the energy of heaven and earth underwent a huge shock and wildly surged towards Long Chen. Bang! Long Chen spat out a mouthful of blood. His body felt like it was on the verge of exploding, and he fainted. When Long Chen came to his senses, he saw his mother worriedly examining him. Seeing he had woken, she was both alarmed and happy. "Chen, you scared your mom. What were you doing?" Long Chen quickly replied, "Mom, it's nothing too big. A furnace explosion is normal when refining pills." He could only use a furnace explosion as an excuse. It was not easy to reassure his mother, but once he had used his divine sense to examine his insides, almost letting out a shocked exclamation. He had somehow gained a Danshin. The originally empty spot now held 3 cyclones that were slowly revolving. What is going on? Noticing that the Feng Fu star on the bottom of his foot was still there, he relaxed quite a bit. But seeing those 3 cyclones at his Danshin still gave him pause. When his personal spirit root had been extracted, his Danshin had turned into a land of nothing but death. That was something that could not be recovered from, unless... Did this mean that after condensing the Feng Fu star, the Danshin would be reconstructed? Thinking back to what had happened just before he had fainted, he knew that the terrifying energy from heaven and earth that had surged into him was something that no ordinary person could endure. That energy had been crazily berserk. It was not something people could use. Could it mean that that energy had been used to destroy the original Danshin and then build a new one in its place? But in truth, Long Chen was wrong. The 9-star Hegemon body art was in existence even more terrifying than he had imagined. If he had actually had a Danshin at the time, then he would already be dead. Although Long Chen couldn't figure it out, He continued to examine the changes and found out that he actually could interact with the 3 cyclones in his Danshin. Did I really reconstruct a Danshin? Long Chen tried to pull the energy within the cyclones to the rest of his body, and found out that there was not the slightest obstruction. He was easily able to use that energy. With a stamp of his foot, the Feng Fu Star's energy also flowed out with the slightest pause. Long Chen was completely befuddled. What was the meaning of this? Was it just to gain another reserve of spiritual ki? With a simple thought, Long Chen drew on the Feng Fu Star's energy into his Danshin. He immediately felt as if a volcano was exploding within him. The terrifying energy was like a tsunami, bursting forth. A mouthful of blood was quickly spat out by him, and he almost fainted again. Long Chen laid on the ground, wildly gasping for air, filled with shock and terror. Even his internal organs had been shaken and torn. Quickly swallowing a healing pill, the medicinal energy enveloped his body. Long Chen's pale face gradually returned to normal. What the hell is going on? Long Chen angrily snarled inside. Just now, he had almost killed himself. That really would have been ridiculous. But he had no answer. In terms of the 9-star Hegemon body art, all that he had in his memories was how to cultivate it. All other information about it was gone. There were no ranks, no origins, and no means of using it. In a sense, its defects were quite similar to his. Long Chen smiled bitterly. He had no spirit root, no spirit bone, and no spirit blood. These 3 things had all been snatched away, so he supposed that he was quite suited to the 9-star Hegemon body art. But if he couldn't figure out what was going on after such a strange event, Long Chen would not be able to stomach it. Grinding his teeth, he continued his interaction with the Feng Fu Star. This time, Long Chen knew not to use such a large amount of it. He slowly drew a tiny amount, bit by bit. Boom! When that slightest bit of energy entered his Danshin, Long Chen clearly sensed the 3 cyclones become 10 times larger in an instant. Most shocking of all was that when the slightest bit of Feng Fu Star's energy entered, they went from slowly revolving to crazily spinning. Following the wild revolving of the 3 cyclones, endless energy immediately flowed out to all of Long Chen's body, filling him with power. Long Chen had finally figured out one of the secrets of the 9-star Hegemon body art. It really was too shocking and too frightening. Even Long Chen himself was a bit terrified. Is this what the 9-star transformations in my memories mean? The 3 cyclones in my Danshin, do they indicate 3 transformations? Only after a long time did Long Chen slowly calm his thoughts down. Since he had 3 cyclones now, then according to the rest of the world's tiers, he would be a weak beginner at the 3rd heaven stage of ki condensation. But as for whether he was truly weak, that was something only Long Chen knew. This discovery filled him with both shock and excitement. With a touch of his spatial ring, an ancient beast hide appeared in his hand. That was what he had gained in exchange for bribing the blood condensation expert. Split the heavens. Split the heavens. Let me just see what secrets are hidden within you. Chapters 26, End.